Welcome to the Pennsylvania Case Law Update While You Drive podcast. You give us less than 20 minutes per week, we will make sure you never miss changes in the law. This week's episode is brought to you by the McShane Firm. For nearly 20 years, the attorneys of the McShane Firm have been trusted by our neighbors and our friends to represent them in DUI and criminal law cases.
Thank you for joining us for episode 29 of the Pennsylvania Case Law Update While You Drive podcast. I'm your host, Katie McShane, and today we are covering cases decided between January 7th, 2021 and January 12th, 2021. Only one case to discuss this week, and like many of the cases that are reported, there are no major law changes, but is rather an analysis of how fact-specific cases can be and how even when the case is not that interesting, the way the law applies to certain facts is important. All of these cases can be useful when you find yourself with a case with a similar fact pattern. You can use this case law to help shape your case. In Commonwealth v. Wallace, the defendant was convicted of aggravated assault, criminal conspiracy, and some charges related to carrying a firearm without a license and as a person prohibited from possessing firearms. The facts of the case are as follows. In April of 2019, the defendant was at a bar with a friend and captured on surveillance going in and out for much of the evening and afternoon. At around 6 o'clock p.m., the defendant went out to his car, got a gun, and tucked it into the waistband of his pants. The defendant and his friend eventually left the pub and met up with another individual. They encountered another person, and the defendant pointed his gun at the victim. As the victim ran away, the defendant chased him and fired multiple shots at the victim. Following trial, the defendant was convicted of all charges and was sentenced to consecutive sentences on all of those charges. The defendant filed a timely appeal. In his first two issues, the defendant challenges evidentiary rulings. First, regarding photographs that the defendant claims were inflammatory. The trial court found that the photographs were not inflammatory and further stated that to the extent that one might find them inflammatory, they are so essential to the Commonwealth's case that their relevance outweighs any potential inflammatory nature. The court further instructed the jury to safeguard against any possible prejudice. The Superior Court found no abuse of discretion. The second evidentiary issue stemmed from GPS data. The court found that GPS data automatically generated by a computer, free from interference by any person, does not constitute a statement and therefore cannot qualify as hearsay. The Superior Court also evaluated what is necessary to establish proof of a conspiracy. A conviction for conspiracy requires proof of an intent to commit or aid in an unlawful act, an agreement with a co-conspirator, and an overt act in furtherance of the conspiracy. Because it is difficult to prove an explicit or formal agreement to commit an unlawful act, such an agreement may be proved inferentially by circumstantial evidence such as the relations, conduct, or circumstances of the parties or overt acts on the part of the co-conspirators. It is not enough to establish a conspiracy when they join into an affray spontaneously rather than pursuant to a common plan, agreement, or understanding. Here, the court found there was sufficient evidence to establish conspiracy based on behavior prior to, during, and after the assault. The final question raised involved the discretionary aspects of sentencing. The court found that the question was properly raised and therefore could be addressed on the merits. However, the court found that despite the deviation from the sentencing guidelines, those guidelines are merely one factor among many the court must consider in imposing sentence. The court may deviate from the recommended guidelines if necessary to fashion a sentence which takes into account the protection of the public, the rehabilitative needs of the defendant, and the gravity of the particular offense as it relates to the impact on the life of the victim and the community. When a court deviates from the guidelines, they must demonstrate on the record its awareness of the sentencing guidelines and offer a contemporaneous written statement of the reasons for deviating from the guidelines. The court here properly articulated its reasons for exceeding the guidelines, and therefore the defendant is entitled to no relief on the discretionary aspects of sentencing. The judgment of the trial court is affirmed in all respects. The key takeaways from this case are this. Evidentiary rulings are reviewed on an abuse of discretion standard and are very difficult to overcome. To prove a conspiracy, you don't have to have direct evidence of an agreement or plan. Circumstantial evidence is enough. And when challenging the discretionary aspects of a sentence, if the court articulates the reasons for deviating from the guidelines, that too will be very difficult to overcome. That's all I have for you this week. Thank you once again for joining us. The link to this case, as well as the cases not discussed today, can be found in the case notes. Have a wonderful week.
Thank you for listening to the Pennsylvania Case Law Update While You Drive podcast. Be sure to subscribe to this podcast and our YouTube channel to make sure that you are always in the know when it comes to important changes in Pennsylvania case law. We want to thank this week's sponsor, the McShane Firm. The McShane firm is a central Pennsylvania fixture when it comes to DUI and criminal defense. The attorneys and staff at the McShane firm believe in good old-fashioned central Pennsylvania values like hard work and straight talking. Give them a call if you or a loved one ever needs help.